Okay, thanks for inviting me. I'll talk about some underwater stuff and underwater 60 pose estimation. Um, Before starting, let me introduce my background a little bit. I worked on underwater robot project, having this kind of robot to navigate through near the ship hull to inspect the in-water portion of the hull, using a camera to detect some damages or some sort of like things like that. Um, Now I'm in the civil and environmental engineering. I study a lot about the urban environment, but today's topic, what I want to talk is mostly underwater stuff. What's the challenging thing for underwater is would be this example. So when I was working in hull inspection project, there was a day in the morning. We put the robot in the water, and as you can see from the camera, it was very clear. The water was very clear. We see a lot of registration. We make a lot of matches between a pair of images nicely. However, after lunch, only after 3 hours, this is what happened. That's because of the tidal change and water became turbid so badly. And in that demo, we couldn't make nice registration at all due to this bad image degradation. So what we felt is, what if we can make this afternoon images as good as in the morning cases? How can we make uh, how can we use visual information in turbid environment? That was my motivation of the work. Um, Throughout the work, in the end, our final objective is to make the robot manipulate nicely in water using camera. That's our main objective. So in this talk, I'll talk about how we can improve visual side, how we can improve the image quality, and then later I'll talk about how we can make the robot recognize an object and estimate the relative pose with respect to the camera, onboard camera, and the target object so that we can grasp in the water. Um, this is called dehazing problem. The most simple model for the dehazing would be something like this. Here, we have an eye here, and there must be an object. And what happens is there's a lot of particles in between. So if I write this down in the equation, the clear image is in J, and the image we obtain is I equals to the clear image and ambient light, the weighted sum between the clear image and the ambient light. If the target object is very close, then we will have the J directly. But as the target object is far away, there's more components coming from the ambient light and making this image turbid. So in other words, and what controls in between the A and J term is this T. That's the transmission, which is the distance to this each one of this pixel. So in other words, if we can know the transmission map T and ambient light A properly, it's easy enough for us to just solve this equation in a closed loop, a closed form, and calculate J. That's easy enough. But things are not more complicated, of course. So we thought we can solve this problem in three aspects. First is we had a robot. We know where we put on the light source, and we know where we put the camera. So we know almost everything. And we also know how far the ship hull is from us. So what we think we can do is, let's given an original turbid image, we know where the light is, and we can estimate where the target, the planar surface in front of us, and we can actually solve one term by one, term by term, and make this more enhanced image enough for us to make the registration between image pairs. That's good if we know everything in advance, but in many cases in other robot applications, sometimes we don't have those prior information. In that case, we have to rely on the image processing. So we found the multiband fusion would be a nice solution for this. As you see from the underwater or the drone video, we can make things very clearly. When we were doing this, we focused on two things. First, the algorithm should be very fast, supporting 10 to 30 hertz so that the robot can operate. Secondly, in underwater, color information is not that meaningful. As we all know, the color observes very fast as we go underwater, and in many cases, we rely on grayscale image and achieve resolution instead of the color information. So another objective that we had is we needed an algorithm that works okay for both color and the grayscale image. So secondly, what we wanted to achieve is having this algorithm work for the underwater images. So this is what we achieved. Our algorithm works for both color and grayscale. So that was our second approaches. And like I said previously, if we know the ambient light A term and the transmission map, how far each one of these pixels is, then we can just solve for the clear image A by knowing all these terms. So the idea is, yeah, the third approach could be a deep learning because there's these days deep learning is solving many problems. So first we, from the simulation setup, we could change all the ambient light from the red to the blue or green, and we know all the transmission map because it's a simulation. So we trained many different cases and train our simple network and see if we can clear dehaze an image. So result looks like this, and the rightmost column is the proposed method, and as you see, this is our estimated deep learning estimated ambient light. So we could solve this for the dehazing, but as a byproduct, because I'm in civil and environmental engineering, there was some researchers who were interested in the algorithm that detect the ambient light color. But anyway, that required us a lot of training data, and it was kind of hard for us to secure enough data. It was simulations to allow us to have a lot of data to train, but in reality, that was not always possible. So we searched for another way, like using GAN, so that we can have, we don't need labels to train this network, and GAN allow us to train our network in unsupervised manner. So we received a video stream from CRISO. There's a Korean Research Institute for Ship and Oceanary. They had a underwater robot that looks like a crab. The name of this robot is a crabster, and this actually walks underneath the bottom surface of the water, and they operate within the water. And this is a video they sent us. On the left is the actual image. This is a robot arm or leg and manipulator, and they were trying to take out some things from the water. And as you see, this is very turbid. We tried model-based or multi-band diffusion or the CNN-based one, but what we found out is the GAN-based approach worked out most nice for this video sequence, and also very fast. So that was on the camera side to make this the degraded images better. And another thing we found is to work in underwater, the camera, usually we set up the camera exposure control to run in auto exposure or manual control. But this is not only for the underwater, this is totally applicable to terrain, like autonomous car, like researches. But when we go outside, sometimes we might face direct sunlight, and we want the camera exposure control adapt its exposure value more fast than auto exposure. We can think of this one as a problem of finding a best image quality. Um, if we plot this one, we can plot in this form. The x-axis is exposure time, and y-axis is information of the image. We know the image quality gets better and will decrease as we increase the exposure time. We want to find the best image quality, actually the best exposure, optimal exposure time that yields the best image quality. Um, Solving this one, the shape is very simple. So solving this one is not very difficult, but the challenge here is each one of this function evaluation correspond to actual image grab. So if we wanted to grab an image from a large exposure value, we have to expose the camera longer period of time to get more light, right? So it actually is very burdensome. So what we found is there's a Bayesian optimization, which is perfect for this kind of case. This is perfect when you know your underlying function is not exactly known, and each one of this function evaluation is very expensive, but you want to find the optimal value. So we applied our Bayesian optimization to our approach, and this is how the Bayesian optimization works. Bayesian optimization is based upon the Gaussian process. So it at the same time it estimates the function shape. So after having one function evaluation, this is the estimated function, which is far from the original actual true um, function. But after having 3 to 4 step, we can find this optimum value very fast. So we found this one is very useful for um, having this optimal exposure time for the camera. What we do actually is not only the exposure time. This is for the visualization. I only plotted with respect to the exposure time only for this. But what we do actually is with respect to gain and exposure time at the same time, because gain value is also important for when robot is navigating in a dark environment. Underwater is one of the typical example. When we go deep in the water, then the light disappears fast. So gain is also very important. Okay, so we have tested this one, unfortunately not in underwater, but in most of the indoor or outdoor cases when the light suddenly changes. This is our building, and at night, our building has a sensor system. As we walk, if this one detects a motion, it turns on the light at the nighttime. And even in this kind of sudden changes, other method can break, but our camera exposure control can help us to robustly navigate through this environment. So this is a really very front end. You can apply our camera controller to your own camera and apply, depending on your application, it'll help. So that was from the camera side, how we can improve our vision. And we have a small robot, sea drone, that has light source and the camera here. First, in a very simple test, we had a small water tank, and we put some milk and colors here so that we can have a turbid water, and we put some object in here. And this is a simple object. We apply the just commercial off the shelf YOLO kind of thing to see if we can detect things correctly. Once we detect an object, now we have to estimate the pose between the camera and a target object. And our idea is there's many cases people just reconstruct a target object during the training. But what we find is, what if we learn additional things. We named this one as a primitive, but this, as you can see, this shape tells us the orientation of the target object. So we are giving a network a little clue about its own orientation, and let the network learn its orientation together when it is training. So during this training phase, we learn this associated primitive together and let the network reconstruct this primitive. And from this reconstructed primitive, we can extract key points and estimate our relative pose. And when we are training it, we apply the GAN training strategy. And because of using GAN, we can make this reconstructed primitive much more clear compared to the case when we were not using the GAN for the training strategy. It actually works when even in the case when one axis is totally occluded, and here one axis is totally occluded, but still we were able to reconstruct the primitive and all this associated the key points. Okay, so here's a video. So we assign primitive for each one of the target object, and we reconstruct this primitive, and from here we can extract the relative pose information between camera and the target object. So we only tested so far. We only tested for the publicly available data set. We are currently at the point to implement in our rear underwater cases. So now we have the hazing stuff and camera control and initial results of the pose estimation. So now it's time for us to combine everything together to actually make this algorithm work on the water. So that was my talk. So I talked about two things: underwater vision and camera-only pose estimation. The reason why we are interested in camera only is because underwater you can't use LiDAR or depth camera, IR sensors. So that's why we are interested in camera only pose estimation. So that was my talk, and thank you very much.